For those of you who are at all familiar with the games, you may immediately be wondering what I could possibly be on about. Sindri. You're calling the mild-mannered germaphobe who helps children, who generously provides you his home and insisted that he and his brother create the axe that would bring about balance to the realms, the Blasphemous one. Somehow, despite having Brok right there, the guy who ate his beast of burden for being annoying insults everyone he meets and swears in place of every possible adjective, Sindri is the irreverent one. Yes. While Brok is infamously profane himself with his colorful insults and even more colorful language, his profanity rests squarely in his loud vulgarity. Sindri's, on the other hand, rests quietly in his sacrilege. Brok may have gotten himself banned from entire realms for his escapades, but Sindri, it was Sindri who not only violated that which is sacred to nature, but also that which was sacred to the dwarves. This is the tale of Sindri, the blasphemous brother. Early on in God of War Ragnarok, Sindri and Atreus trek out on their own to pay a visit to Freya. On their way back, though, Sindri asks Atreus for his thoughts. He tells a tale of how, unbeknownst to everyone, Brok had died in an accident years ago, and that secretly, Sindri had brought him back. Although while telling this story to Atreus, he leaves out many key details. However, God of War Lost Pages of Norse Myth provides us the whole picture. It was a promotional campaign that tells stories of legend within the God of War Norse universe. They reveal lore not found explicitly written in-game, but they are canon nonetheless. The Forging of the Leviathan is a tale that provides the full story that Sindri alludes to. Allow me to paraphrase. The Huldra brothers created Mjolnir to be the greatest weapon the Nine Realms had ever seen, and presented it to Thor, the god of thunder. This gift put the Huldra brothers' name on the map as the greatest smiths in all the realms, and also as partly responsible for the realm's greatest massacre. Sindri questioned, "What have we wrought? What calamity have we unleashed upon this world?" After hearing that Thor slaughtered more giants using Mjolnir. Brok stomps his foot down, crushing a large spider, before dismissing Sindri, saying that he's the one who had to outdo himself and create this lightning hammer for the thunder god. But Sindri is just as quick to remind Brok that regardless of who wields it, or whose idea it was, they made it together. And together, they need to make things right. With purpose, the two began their work. The long dormant forge reignited, the sparks of their metalwork flying anew. For 2 weeks they toiled, and forged the head of a blade, all while singing dwarven melodies known only to the eldest of smithies. It was on the 15th day that a bloated, jet-black spider crept silently from beneath Brok's workbench, where he had previously crushed one of its kin. He felt a tickle on his leg, but recalled when the brothers were forging Mjolnir. A gadfly had bitten him 3 times, and thanks to that distraction, Brok and Sindri went out of sync while forging. This mistake resulted in the hammer having its notably stubby handle, marring their original design. Consequently, Brok resolved not to be distracted again. Moments after feeling a sharp pinch, however, Brok's limbs went cold, and his vision went dark. As the spider fell and scampered off into the dark, Sindri caught his brother just as the blood ran cold. It's because of these events that Brok's skin is turned his signature sickly blue, as his body began to decompose. It's then that Sindri journeyed to Alfheim, and more specifically to the Lake of Souls. Upon reaching its shore, Sindri took one of Brok's smithing gloves and donned it himself. The smithing gloves of a dwarf are sacred and unique to each. He'd need Brok's glove if he were going to be able to reach Brok's soul, and so he did. Diving into the Lake of the Dead, braving the horrors that sought to drown him in the depths beneath, all so that he could defy the very laws of life and death. Sindri refused to accept that his brother had died, and as such, not only did he disrupt the dwarven right of death, a right that his brother fully deserved, but he violated nature itself. Sindri's punishment for this came swiftly, as a sort of curse remained on him after he emerged from the waters. Vomiting the thick black liquid that had filled his lungs, he began to feel as though his skin had been infested by swarms of insects. This discomfort is something which haunts him to this very day, as he mentions to Atreus that he can still feel the touch of the dead on his skin. Despite this, the true hubris of his actions at the lake would only become clear many years later, during the events leading up to Ragnarok. It was when Atreus successfully had stolen Odin's mask and brought it to Sindri's home that Tyr had finally found a spark of resolve. When you free him from his long captivity in the beginning of God of War Ragnarok, the former God of War was already thoroughly broken. Now a staunch pacifist, Tyr would speak philosophy and try to convince Kratos, Atreus, and others that peace was the only way forward with Asgard. But now with Asgard on the back foot, Gjallarhorn in their possession, and a strong point of leverage against Odin, Tyr found it within himself to finally stand and lead the group against Asgard. Lead everyone, that is, except for Brok. Brok took it upon himself to call Tyr out in his trademark irreverent fashion, noting how there's no way that Tyr could know a way into Asgard that the Huldred brothers did not. More importantly, the fact that Tyr addressed Atreus as Loki was a dead giveaway that something was terribly wrong.
You never shut up! Brok! All the things, Odin.
It was in this moment that all these years later, Sindri's true punishment was unleashed in all its sorrow and in all its nothingness. You see, when Sindri disallowed Brok's passing, he only managed to save most of his brother's soul, 1/4 of it was missing. Should Brok die again, or for any reason his soul slip his body once more, his soul would be lost. The wisps would be unable to guide his incomplete soul back to the lake in order to find the afterlife. As such, Sindri, in his selfish need to cheat death and his unwillingness to relinquish his brother, had condemned his brother, not to Helheim, no, but to oblivion. It is at this moment, when the full weight of his transgressions crashes down upon him, that Sindri does something he had never done before. He commits a new cardinal sin. The Huldra brothers both have a unique ability that allows them to step into the realm between realms. It's how they always seem to appear out of nowhere, and why they can always be manning the nearest shop when Kratos is on his journey. This strange ability has led to the discomfort of multiple characters from time to time, as the brothers, intentionally or not, tend to startle people when they appear out of thin air. But never, ever, do they do this on screen. They are both very intentional, even Brok, about never realm walking when people can see them. Sindri has dialogue regarding this very thing, when he confronts Kratos and tells him that Brok cannot be allowed to meet the lady. Kratos denies him. If you don't leave, Sindri will say this.
You needn't keep staring. I'll go.
He refuses to leave until the player has him fully off screen, because only when you can't see him will Sindri walk between realms. Yet, with his brother's body cold in his arms again, Sindri abandons this. And that's not all. It's now with the burden of violating that which was sacred upon him that Sindri abandons everything that was once sacred to him. When next we see him, Sindri is not the same dwarf. We find him at Tyr's temple, tempering Brok's sword. But here, the terminally cleanly Sindri still has blood all over his armor. And more importantly, Sindri is smithing with his bare hands. Where in God of War, Sindri with full gloves and armor could barely bring himself to touch the axe of his own creation thanks to a bit of dried blood on the handle, now he is covered in blood and soot and is intentionally, of his own volition, getting his bare hands dirty. He's cast aside his comforts. His phobias are now the least of what troubles him. But most importantly of all is what this all represents. While both his filthy armor and willingness to get his hands dirty speak volumes about Sindri's enormous shift in character, the most important thing about his barehanded smithing is that he's smithing barehanded at all. Allow me to remind you, a dwarf's smithing gloves are sacred. Now, much like his value of cleanliness, his aversion to vulgarity, and the rule that he and his brother always kept never to realm step in front of people, he casts aside that which was sacred to all dwarves, even his irreverent brother. Sindri continues to demonstrate his desecration of all that he held dear, as the dwarf who once cowered in the face of danger, refusing to don real weapons and insisted upon the utmost safety, now rebukes Atreus when the boy tries to protect him on the battlefield. He smacks the boy's hand away when he tries to help him up a ledge, and leaps at the first moment of opportunity for violence. Even at Brok's funeral, he would not hear the words of those in attendance, and Realm stepped away before everyone's prying eyes. Sindri's tragedy is in his selfishness. Even when Brok, in his dying breath, tells him that he must let go, Sindri refuses, and instead blames those around him for his mistakes. Although Brok's second death may have been brought about prematurely by Odin, what Sindri fails to accept, or perhaps even realize, is that he has no one to blame but himself. Returned to life or not, Brok was already dead. Inevitably, his soul would leave his body again, sooner or later. Whether that happened now or in another century, Brok's soul would always be lost thanks to what Sindri did. And when that time comes, Sindri would have to confront the reality that now not only is his brother gone, but that he truly will never see his brother again. Odin's ambush provided Sindri a convenient scapegoat for his trauma. It was Atreus who wanted to save Tyr, Atreus who ventured into Asgard, Atreus who disappeared to gods know where for 2 days, Atreus who freed Garm from hell and allowed the enemy into my home, Atreus who lost control and mauled me as a bear!
I gave you everything. My skills, my friendship, my home, my secrets, my treasures. And you just kept taking. And now what have I got? Not even my family.
You want sorry? This is what sorry looks like.
But no. Not Freya, the woman who knew Odin best, nor Mimir, the smartest man alive with his Bifrost eyes, nor indeed Sindri himself, in his very own home, saw through Odin's deception. Yet, if Sindri had made peace with Brok's death when it happened all those years ago, and he, Sindri, were the one to meet Odin's blade that day, the Huldra brothers would have been reunited in the afterlife. Unable to accept that he cost his brother anything, Sindri cast aside everything. His family, his values, his virtues, his standards, his conduct. Not even his precious gloves were spared. In death, even the profanity of Brok was overshadowed by the blasphemy of his brother. And until we see him again, I've been LoMurphyX, and I will see you, yes you, next time.